Okay, I know I said I was done talking about this kind of stuff for a while, but I guess much like with the Doctor himself, the Council lies. So at the end of the video I made about Bill, I did say that if anything happened in the comments that spurred on a whole new train of thought in a similar direction, that I probably would be back with another video, and here we are. Now this one's going to be a bit more free-flowing than my thoughts were when I did my overview of political messaging in Doctor Who, or addressing the belief that Bill is an agenda-pushing companion. I went into both of those with a goal, kind of an end conclusion that I knew I was building towards. This one, I don't have a grander plan, but I still kind of want to talk about it. So the reason I want to talk about one Captain Jack Harkness is because I saw discussions of him come up a fair amount in my video about Bill, and also actually a bit in videos before that, but it came out more there. Now, I wasn't surprised by this because really prior to Bill, he was kind of the standard bearer for characters who weren't 100% heterosexual. He was the first. Now, over time, there were more. There was Jenny and Vastra. We had a couple of various side characters and so forth. But really, he was sort of the go-to example of that sort of thing in the show for quite a while. Now, there were a number of commenters on that video about Bill who posited the question, why are people okay with Jack but not okay with Bill? Now, some people seem to be asking this question in kind of a backhanded way, implying, or some just outright saying, I think Jack did it better than Bill did. And others seem to be asking it with utter sincerity, saying, you know, why is everyone fine with Jack and not with Bill? And I have to assume that the ones asking in sincerity are either newer viewers or younger viewers. And I'm not saying that like in some sort of patronizing, pulling rank way, like I've been watching longer than you, therefore my opinion counts for more. I just mean that I have to assume they weren't around when Jack was a little more fresh and new, because if they were, they've got real selective memories. Now, full disclosure, I myself was not watching back when Series 1 aired, so I was not on the ground floor when Jack himself got introduced. I got into the show during Series 3, and I didn't start watching it as it aired until Series 4. But pretty much at that point, I immediately looked into forums and other online venues to talk about it, because I didn't have any friends in person who were watching it at that point, so I had no one else to talk to about it. And the character of Jack back then was not nearly as universally loved as people seem to be remembering right now, or at least not from what I saw. Now, part of the reason I was reluctant to talk about this before is unfortunately it's hard for me to back up with hard data. A lot of the forums that I was on at the time actually don't even exist anymore, and there's a limit to how far I'm personally willing to dig through things like old Reddit posts and whatnot to try and find support for this. So if you're gonna just choose to not believe me, I don't know what to tell you. But my memory is certainly that at the time, a lot of people were making the same complaints about Jack then that they make about Bill now. He was called a token character, an agenda-pushing character. People bemoaned how frequently his sexuality was brought up, and the fact that he was willing to bang anything. There was an interesting stripe of fan that actually seemed to get really annoyed that his preferences were leaning much more frequently towards men specifically by the time Torchwood was a few seasons in. And so it's all very baffling to me that people are now going, Jack was the way it should have been done, Bill's doing it wrong. And why I tend to think people asking that question or expressing some of those sentiments must be newer fans to the show. Because what I will grant is nobody complains about Jack for those reasons now. They did then, but they don't anymore, so why did it stop? I mean, the character didn't change. He was always highly sexual from the beginning, and he remained so. So what changed? Honestly, I think just the passage of time. At this point, fans have distance from Jack to be able to look at him without as much raw, visceral emotion of living in the moment with him. And Jack's been off the show for a while. He has not had an appearance since the David Tennant specials. Now, Torchwood did go on a little bit longer after that, but anyone who was watching Torchwood presumably was completely okay with Jack as a character since it was basically his show, and not everyone who watched Doctor Who does watch Torchwood. So Jack has not appeared on the main show in coming up on 8 years now. Why is that important? Well, the kinds of things that detractors said at the time were going to happen as a result of the introduction of a character like Jack Harkness didn't happen. What am I talking about? Well, at the time, certain stripes of fans said the same thing about Jack that they now say about the casting of Jodie Whittaker and the character of Bill. What's next? Is the TARDIS gonna be rainbow patterned and the sonic screwdriver's gonna be a tampon that dispenses condoms? It was all fairly standard slippery slope stuff, and slippery slope is almost always a fallacy, and even when it's not a logical fallacy, I find it to be a very cowardly argument because you're basically hiding behind something that doesn't exist. So you're trying to make an argument against something, but you won't actually take a stance against that thing. Instead, you're taking a stance against the theoretical worst thing that will result later, which allows you this weird thing of denouncing something now without actually standing your ground and denouncing it in and of itself. And unless you can cite existing precedent to actually show how the thing you're saying will actually lead to the next step you're claiming, then it's just a deceitful argument. And in the case of Jack, time proved that that was not the case. The introduction of a non-heterosexual character into the world of Doctor Who was not step one in it becoming rainbow gay time in the TARDIS, where all the chairs are shaped like dildos and the time vortex is patterned like the pride flag. And once it became clear, again, through the sheer passage of time, that that didn't happen, and his introduction was not step one in that happening, people backed off those criticisms because they became silly. And I think that with the benefit of time, the same is going to end up being true about Bill, and the same is going to end up being true of Jodie Whittaker playing the Doctor. And I suppose if I am going to reach some kind of conclusion with this, it's that it's frustrating how many people claim to not actually be railing against Bill or against Jodie Whittaker, but instead against the theoretical worst thing that happens later. And look, I do understand the fear that results if you believe something that you love is headed in a direction that you don't like. I am on record at the beginning of this year saying I thought Wonder Woman was going to be terrible because of what had come out of the DCEU up to that point. But you know what? I was wrong, and delighted to be wrong. As fans, we don't have to be okay with everything that happens. We do, however, have to try and be cautious about condemning an actor, creator, writer, or character for what they're doing now because of what we're afraid they're going to do later. And I'm not saying you're not allowed to have those fears, but you can't beat somebody down with an anger generated more about something that they haven't done yet than it is about what they've actually done. Because all of the people who said that Jack Harkness was the death knell of Doctor Who, they look pretty silly now. And for my money, so will the people being so viciously, venomously against Bill or Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor. Caution is one thing. Skepticism is healthy, but preemptive anger, that can be hazardous. That can be flat out toxic. And I say this recognizing that this is something I myself have been guilty of in the past. And if I'm being completely honest, I probably will again. I'm human, I do get wrapped up in emotions. But what I'm going to try really hard to do is be more fair to things that have not actually come out yet, at least in terms of my anger level. I'm not promising I'm not still going to be a skeptical, grumpy, I think this is going to stink bastard. I'm just talking about the vitriol. And also, if and when these things come out and do in fact suck, yeah, I will get angry about that. But there's no need to try and cross that bridge before the darn thing's even been built. And on that awkwardly worded metaphor, I think we'll wrap things up. So what are your thoughts on looking back at the reception to Captain Jack Harkness, or about anything else that I have said? Please keep it civil and as best as you can. It's what I'm trying to do these days. In any case, whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, check me out on Twitter at Council of Geeks. Give a listen to the Council of Geeks podcast. I am also one half of the Punch Like a Girl podcast, available on fireandwaterpodcast.com and on the Fire and Water Network podcast feed. And until next time, this council is adjourned.